After 1,000 years of peace, aliens declare war, and humans just laugh reaches its pivotal moment when Captain Mara Lu boldly transports herself, armed with only a joke book, onto the enemy flagship. Facing the Zinth leader, she delivers an ancient human joke that triggers unprecedented laughter among the hive-mind aliens, shattering their rigid certainty and transforming interstellar conflict into shared understanding. The crystalline dome of the Grand Council chamber sparkled with the prismatic light of 3 suns, casting rainbows across the assembled delegates. Outside the massive windows, the celestial ballet of Valyria Prime's tri-sun system performed its daily spectacle. Alpha Valyria's golden glow, merging with Beta's azure brilliance and Gamma's ruby luminescence. The combined light filtered through specially designed panels, transformed into a comfortable radiance that suited the visual receptors of dozens of different alien species. Captain Mara Lu stood at the observation deck, her Terran Diplomatic Corps uniform crisp and formal, watching as representatives from across the interstellar Concord filed into their designated sectors. After serving 15 years on diplomatic vessels, she still found herself awestruck by these gatherings, living proof that cooperation across vast biological and cultural differences was possible. "Penny for your thoughts, Captain." The melodic voice belonged to her xenobiologist, Dr. Kellen R. Rin, a Vexari whose slender, 7-foot frame moved with characteristic grace. Iridescent scales along Kellen's neck flushed a soft blue, indicating curiosity. Mara had learned. "Just admiring 2.5 millennia of peace," she replied, nodding toward the chamber, where over 40 species mingled. "Hard to believe humans were once convinced we'd never find anyone out here but microbes." Kellen's multifaceted eyes blinked in sequence, the Vexari equivalent of amusement. "And yet here you are, chaotic little mammals, somehow becoming the Concord's most prolific diplomats." "Chaotic? Us?" Mara affected mock offense. "I'll have you know the Terran delegation prepared for this renewal ceremony with exacting precision. We only improvised 60% of our protocol this time." A crackling voice interrupted through their comm devices. "Captain, we've got a situation with the refreshment synthesizers." It was Suri Patel, Mara's chief engineer, her voice tinged with the stress that only malfunctioning technology could induce. "The molecular calibration for non-oxygen breathers is off by 0.3 microns. The Gulid ambassador just sampled our ceremonial water and is now hiccuping bubbles." Mara suppressed a laugh. "Is it harmful?" "No. Just undignified. The bubbles are forming rather intricate shapes as they rise. Some delegates are finding it quite entertaining." "See?" Kellen gestured with 3 of his 7 fingers. "Chaos. Always chaos with humans." Mara shrugged. "Row 9, are you monitoring?" The small holographic projection of a gender-neutral human figure materialized beside her shoulder. The ship's AI companion had chosen this form centuries ago when first paired with the Serenity's Writ, though the translucent blue avatar occasionally shifted appearance based on complex algorithms that even Suri couldn't fully explain. "Already dispatched maintenance nanites, Captain," Row 9 reported, its voice carrying the peculiar harmonics of an artificial intelligence trying to sound reassuringly human. "And I've prepared an amusing anecdote about effervescence across cultures to distract the Gulid representative." "Perfect," Mara said, straightening her uniform. "Let's head to our seats. The renewal begins in 20 minutes, and I want to observe the pre-ceremony interactions." As they made their way through the crowded corridors, Mara noted the subtle undercurrents of tension. Normally, these quinquennial gatherings were celebratory affairs, but today, whispered conversations halted as humans passed, only to resume once they were safely distant. A pair of Morsillan diplomats huddled near a light sculpture, their discussion animated, until they noticed Mara. Their 4 eyes each widened, and they shifted to formal postures, inclining their heads in practiced respect. Consul Lu, one acknowledged, their universal translator, rendering perfect Terran standard. Ambassador Trell, Mara returned the greeting. Looking forward to another 500 years of prosperity. Indeed, the Morsillan replied, though its upper eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of reservation. Though some discussions about resource allocation may be forthcoming. Kellen's scales rippled with concern as they moved on. That's the fourth such encounter today. Something's brewing. Political maneuvering, Mara dismissed. There's always someone unhappy about expansion rights or trade routes. But even as she said it, she felt the familiar tingle at the base of her skull, the instinct that had kept her alive during the rare diplomatic missions gone wrong. Earth and its colonies had maintained exemplary relationships with the conquered since first contact over a millennium ago. Why would tensions surface now, at the 2500th Charter renewal? They entered the vast chamber, taking their places in the Terran section. Around them, the architectural marvel of Valyrian design stretched in impossible curves and angles that somehow remained harmonious. The chamber accommodated tens of thousands, with specialized environments for each species unobtrusively integrated into the grand design. Suri joined them, her engineer's uniform showing traces of the nanite solution she'd deployed to fix the refreshment crisis. At 32, she was the youngest senior officer on the Serenity's writ, a prodigy whose understanding of cross-species technology had earned her this prestigious assignment. Crisis averted, she reported, dropping into her seat. Though I think the Gulid delegate rather enjoyed being the center of attention. Those bubbles spelled out poetry in their native script, completely by accident. With humans, it's difficult to distinguish between accident and intention, came a new voice. High Consul Neri of the Jatharan hegemony, an old friend of Mara's, settled his massive, rhinoceros-like form in the reinforced seat beside them. That's what makes you so fascinating, and so concerning to certain elements. Mara's eyes narrowed. Concerning? Neri, we've upheld every treaty for 1,000 years. The Jatharan's leathery skin creased in what passed for a smile. Yes, but you've expanded to 73 star systems in that time. The Zinth Collective has managed only 31, despite being part of the Conquered for twice as long. Quality over quantity, Suri muttered, then flushed when Mara shot her a warning glance. Neri rumbled a laugh. Precisely the attitude that worries them. Humans achieve through intuitive leaps what takes others centuries of methodical progress. He leaned closer, his voice dropping. Watch the Collective's delegation today. They've been calculating. Before Mara could press for details, a sonorous tone reverberated through the chamber, signaling the ceremony's commencement. The central dais illuminated, and the Conquered's supreme arbiter, a Valyrian whose crystalline body refracted the light into mesmerizing patterns, took the ceremonial position. Representatives of the 87 worlds of the interstellar Conquered, the arbiter began, their voice translated simultaneously into each species' preferred communication method. We gather to renew the charter that has bound us in peace for 25 centuries. As the ritual words flowed, detailing the history and principles of the Conquered, Mara's attention drifted to the Zinth delegation. The collective representatives sat perfectly still, their insectoid bodies arranged in precise geometric patterns. Unlike other delegations that showed a range of expressions and movements, the Zinth operated with unified purpose, a true hive mind whose individual members functioned as cells in a greater organism. Their leader, High Consul Merthok, was distinguished only by subtle bioluminescent patterns that pulsed across his carapace. According to intelligence briefings, Merthok was relatively young for a collective leader, merely 300 years old, and considered a progressive by Zinth standards. Yet, there was something in the rhythmic pulsing of his light patterns that set Mara on edge. The ceremony proceeded according to ancient protocol. Representatives from the founding species recited their commitments. Newer members, including Earth, reaffirmed their dedication to conquered principles. Achievements of the past 5 years were celebrated, and goals for the next quinquennium established. Then came the moment for the renewal itself, the symbolic touching of the charter crystal by each delegation's leader. One by one, they approached, Valyrians, Jatharans, Morcillans, and dozens more, each placing a physical connection to the ancient artifact at the chamber's heart. When Earth's turn came, Mara stepped forward, feeling the weight of humanity's future in her movements. She placed her palm on the cool surface of the crystal, feeling the subtle vibration that suggested more than mere mineral. According to legend, the crystal contained the quantum-entangled intentions of all signatories throughout history, a physical manifestation of shared commitment. "On behalf of Earth and all human colonies," she recited, "I renew our pledge to uphold the principles of peace, cooperation, and respect for all sentient life within the conquered and beyond." The crystal pulsed with soft light beneath her hand. Accepting the renewal, Mara returned to her seat, the familiar sense of pride and responsibility settling over her. The ceremony continued, each species recommitting in turn. The Zinth would be last, as the newest major power to join the conquered. But as the penultimate delegation, the aquatic Nirtho, completed their pledge, a disturbance rippled through the Zinth section. High Consul Merthak rose before being called, his carapace flashing with intense patterns that even non-Zinth could recognize as unusual. The chamber fell silent as he stepped not to the charter crystal, but to the central speaking position. "Esteemed colleagues," the Zinth leader began, his translated voice unnaturally precise. "The collective has calculated a probability matrix regarding the future stability of our shared compact." Murmurs spread through the chamber. This deviation from protocol was unprecedented. "For 2,500 years, Merthak continued, the conquered has maintained equilibrium through careful balance. Each species advances according to their natural progression, expanding at rates sustainable for all." Mara felt a chill creep up her spine. Beside her, Kellen's scales had shifted to a warning orange. Yet, one species defies this natural order. Merthak's compound eyes seemed to fix directly on the Terran delegation. Humans. Their expansion is exponential rather than linear. Their technological development chaotic rather than methodical. Their cultural influence viral. Gasps and clicks of communication devices filled the chamber. Mara stood, protocol forgotten. "High Consul, if you have concerns, the appropriate forum is the Expansion Regulatory Committee, not the renewal ceremony." Merthak's mandibles clacked once. Dismissal. "The time for committees has passed. Our probability matrices are conclusive. Within 3 centuries, humans will dominate 53% of habitable systems within conquered space. Within 5 centuries, their cultural paradigms will have irreversibly altered the sociological development of 68% of member species." The Supreme Arbiter stepped forward, their crystalline form pulsing with diplomatic urgency. "High Consul, this is most irregular." "The collective has reached consensus," Merthak interrupted, his voice rising. "By the ancient right of species self-preservation, encoded in subsection 12.7 of the original charter, the Zinth Collective hereby formally declares war against Earth and all human-controlled territories, effective immediately." The chamber erupted in chaos. Delegates leapt to their feet. Translators struggled with the cacophony of simultaneous outbursts, and security drones descended from concealed compartments. Mara stood frozen, the words echoing in her mind. War. After a millennium of peace? The concept seemed almost incomprehensible. Row 9 materialized by her shoulder, its holographic form cycling through alert patterns. "Captain, the Zinth fleet is moving. Long-range sensors detect multiple battle groups leaving hyperspace near Terra's orbital defenses, and 3 major colony worlds. The reality of the situation crashed down. This wasn't a diplomatic maneuver or negotiating tactic. The collective had been planning this, positioning their forces while sending representatives to a peace ceremony. "Suri, get back to the ship," Mara ordered, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her mind. "Prepare for emergency departure. Kellen, find out which delegations knew about this. Row 9. Contact Earth Defense Command. Priority Alpha." As her crew rushed to comply, Mara locked eyes with Mirthak across the chaotic chamber. The Zinth leader stood perfectly still amid the pandemonium, his compound eyes unreadable, carapace now pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm. He had expected this chaos, planned for it. What he couldn't have expected was Mara's response, a slow, deliberate smile. Because if there was one thing humans understood better than any species in the galaxy, it was how to face the unthinkable. And sometimes, the only sane response to insanity was laughter. The corridors of the diplomatic complex had transformed from ordered processions to frantic movement. Species that had coexisted peacefully for centuries now eyed each other with suspicion, ancient instincts of self-preservation overriding rational thought. Security forces, comprised of representatives from 12 different worlds, struggled to maintain order while frantically receiving contradictory instructions from their home governments. Mara moved against the tide, her small team cutting through the confusion with purpose. "Row 9, status report," she demanded, as they reached a relatively quiet alcove. The AI's hologram flickered, with the strain of managing multiple information streams. Earth Defense Command acknowledges receipt of warning. Planetary shields activated at 87% capacity. Colonial defense networks at varying readiness. Proxima Prime at 92%. New Eden at 76%. Tau Ceti colonies still scrambling. The Zinth ships? Maintaining position at strategic points. No weapons fire yet, but active targeting scans detected. They appear to be waiting for something. Suri pushed through a group of panicked Morsillan diplomats. "I've got transit clearance to the ship. Spaceport's a mess. Everyone's trying to leave at once." Kellen joined them, scales shifting between threat red and analytical blue. "I spoke with contacts in 3 delegations. None were directly informed, but the Jara and Ul admitted they'd received hints that a significant rebalancing was imminent." "Cowards," Suri muttered. "Pragmatists," Kellen corrected. "The collective has been quietly building alliances. Some species share their concerns about human expansion." Mara absorbed this, mind racing through implications. "They've been planning this for decades. The renewal ceremony is symbolic. They wanted to make a statement." "Captain," Row 9 interrupted. "Incoming transmission from Admiral Khatri at EDC headquarters." A small, holographic projection appeared beside Row 9, the stern face of Admiral Priya Khatri, Earth's highest-ranking military officer. Despite the crisis, her expression remained composed, though the lines around her eyes had deepened. "Captain Liu, situation report." Mara straightened instinctively. "Admiral, the Zinth Collective has formally declared war, citing Charter Subsection 12.7, Species Self-Preservation. Their fleet is positioned near Earth and key colonies but hasn't engaged. The Conquered is in disarray, with some delegations clearly having anticipated this move." The Admiral nodded once. "Assessment? This is a calculated power play. The collective believes they can force concessions by threatening direct action, while positioning themselves as defenders of Conquered stability against human disruption." "Recommendations?" Mara paused, aware that her next words could influence humanity's response to its first interstellar war in a millennium. The military option was clear. Earth's defense forces were formidable, developed through centuries of peaceful but cautious preparation. They could fight, possibly even win, but at what cost to 1,000 years of peace? Permission to attempt diplomatic resolution before military engagement, she said finally. Admiral Khatri's expression didn't change, but something in her posture relaxed fractionally. Specifics? Let me take the Serenity's writ to meet the Zinth flagship. My team has unique insights into collective psychology. And if diplomacy fails? Mara met her gaze steadily. Then at least we tried peace first. Isn't that what separates us from the collective? They calculated probabilities. We still believe in possibilities. A ghost of a smile touched the Admiral's lips. You have 24 hours, Captain. After that, we respond with everything we have. The transmission ended. Are you insane? Suri burst out. We're going to fly our unarmed diplomatic vessel straight at a Zinth battle fleet? Not unarmed, Mara corrected. Just not conventionally armed. She turned to the AI. Row 9, access the ship's cultural database. I want everything we have on Zinth psychological response to humor. The AI's holographic eyebrows rose. Humor, Captain. Humor, Mara confirmed. Kellen, you once mentioned a study on cross-species laughter response patterns? The xenobiologist's scales shifted to thoughtful purple. Yes. The Vexari Science Academy published findings suggesting that even hive mind species have evolutionary responses to unexpected cognitive patterns, what humans might call getting the joke. But, Captain, the Zinth have the most rigidly structured thought processes in the Conquered, which makes them the most vulnerable to disruption, Mara concluded. Suri, I need you to reconfigure our communication arrays. When we reach the ship, I'll explain the rest. As they hurried toward the spaceport, Mara's comm unit chimed with an incoming message, text only, from High Consul Neri. The hunter expects prey to flee or fight. It is unprepared for prey that dances. For the first time since the declaration, Mara felt a genuine smile form. The old Jatharan had always understood humans better than most. 20 minutes later, they reached the Serenity's writ. The sleek diplomatic vessel gleamed in its berth, its design reflecting Earth's aesthetic philosophy, functional elegance with touches of artistic flourish that many species found either charming or bewildering. Unlike military vessels with their obvious weapons arrays, the writ presented a profile of graceful curves and inviting contours. The spaceport around them was chaos, ships of all configurations preparing for emergency departures, diplomatic security forces struggling to maintain priority protocols. Through it all, Mara's team moved with surprising calm, as if they were simply preparing for a routine mission. Once aboard, they gathered on the bridge. The neural interfaces hummed to life as each took their station. Mara in the captain's chair, Suri at engineering, Kellen at xenobiology and cultural analytics. Row 9's presence expanded throughout the ship's systems, its holographic avatar appearing simultaneously at multiple stations. All systems online, Suri reported. Departure clearance received. We're designated Priority 3. Override, Mara ordered. Security Protocol Omega-7. Suri's eyes widened. That's an Earth Defense Command emergency authorization. And this is an emergency. Row 9. Transmit Admiral Khatri's authorization codes. The AI complied, and moments later, the spaceport control responded. Serenity's writ. You are cleared for immediate departure. May fortune favor your mission. As the ship lifted from its berth, Mara activated the main view screen. The majestic spectacle of Valyria Prime filled the display, 3 suns casting their combined light on the diplomatic capital of galactic civilization. Around the planet, hundreds of vessels were in motion, some fleeing, others moving into defensive formations. Set course for Earth, Mara instructed. Maximum speed. Captain, Kellen interjected. I've reviewed the data on Zinth psychological responses. While they do possess neurological pathways, analogous to humor appreciation, their collective consciousness deliberately suppresses individualized reactions. In simple terms, they can understand jokes intellectually, but are conditioned not to respond emotionally. All conditioning can be overcome, Mara replied. Suri, I need those communication arrays reconfigured for wide-spectrum broadcasting. Already on it, the engineer said, fingers dancing across her interface. But what exactly are we broadcasting? Mara's smile widened. Everything. Human comedy throughout history. Slapstick, wordplay, satire, stand-up, sitcoms, the works. Suri paused. You want to beam comedy at a war fleet? Not just beam it, Mara corrected. I want to saturate every communication frequency they use. I want their navigational data interrupted with punchlines. I want their targeting systems receiving knock-knock jokes. Kellen's scales rippled with doubt. Captain, even if this creates confusion, it won't stop weapons fire. It's not about stopping them, Mara explained. It's about changing the narrative. The collective expects us to respond with fear or aggression, fight or flight. Those reactions fit their probability models. But what happens when you introduce a variable they never calculated? Understanding dawned on Suri's face. We show them humans don't react like any other species. Precisely. Row 9, how long until we enter hyperspace? 3 minutes. Captain, all systems prepared. Good. Send a message to all Earth and colonial vessels. Tell them to keep watching comedy channels while we mobilize. As the Serenity's Writ accelerated toward the hyperspace entry point, Mara felt the weight of 1,000 years of peace on her shoulders, and the strange lightness of knowing that humor might be humanity's most powerful weapon. The first skirmishes had already begun by the time the Serenity's Writ emerged from hyperspace near Earth's outer defense perimeter. The main view screen displayed tactical data overlaid on the vista of humanity's homeworld, blue and green, and perfect against the blackness of space. Between Earth and the diplomatic vessel floated the Zinth battle fleet, 12 massive ships arranged in precise, geometric formation, their organic mechanical design reflecting the collective's aesthetics of mathematical perfection. Already, several human defense vessels had engaged, their movements erratic and unpredictable compared to the methodical Zinth approach. Status report, Mara demanded, watching as energy weapons flashed between the combatants. Earth shields holding at 95%. Row 9 reported. Colonial defense networks fully activated. Terran fleet executing Protocol Sigma. Asymmetrical engagement patterns. Casualties? 2 defense cutters damaged. No reports of loss of life yet. The Zinth appear to be conducting calibrated warning strikes rather than full offensive engagement. Mara nodded grimly. They're still hoping we'll capitulate under threat rather than fight. Suri, is our broadcasting system ready? The engineer looked up from her station, eyes bright with manic energy. Ready and then some. I've configured the arrays to piggyback signals onto the Zinth's own communication frequencies. They won't be able to block us without blocking themselves. Kellen, what's your assessment of the most effective content? The xenobiologist's scales had settled into analytical blue. Based on Zinth neurological structure, I recommend starting with observational humor about shared experiences across species. Their collective consciousness may find it difficult to suppress recognition of universal truths. Make it so, Mara ordered. Row 9, open a direct channel to the Zinth flagship. The AI hesitated. Captain, they're refusing communication. Don't ask permission. Override their systems if necessary. That would constitute an act of cyber warfare, Row 9 noted, though its holographic form was already cycling through penetration protocols. They declared war first, Mara reminded it. Just get me that channel. As the Serenity's Writ approached the battle zone, a warning shot flashed across their bow, a precisely calculated energy burst that dissipated just meters from their shields. Message from Zinth Command, Row 9 announced. They demand we retreat or be destroyed. Respond with Protocol 17, Mara instructed. Suri looked up sharply. Protocol 17, that's... Standard first contact visual package, Mara confirmed. including humanity's first moon landing. Understanding dawned on Kellen's face. Psychological disruption. You're making them question their assumptions about human responses. Exactly. Now, Shuri, start broadcasting. The engineer activated her modified communication array, and thousands of carefully selected comedy excerpts began streaming toward the Zinth fleet. Classic performances spanning centuries of human humor, translated into formats comprehensible to the collective consciousness. On the view screen, the battle continued. But something subtle had changed. The precise Zinth formations showed minute irregularities, ships drifting slightly out of alignment, energy weapon discharges becoming less coordinated. "It's working," Kellen breathed, watching the data streams. Their ship's movement patterns are showing signs of cognitive dissonance. Row 9, any progress on that direct channel? The AI's hologram pulsed with effort. "I've identified a backdoor in their authentication protocols. Attempting to..." It paused. "Connection established. Captain, you're live to the Zinth flagship bridge." The view screen shifted to show the command center of the enemy vessel. Unlike human ships with their individual stations, the Zinth bridge was a collective space where multiple members moved in coordinated patterns around a central processing node. At its heart stood High Consul Murthok, his carapace pulsing with rapid, irregular patterns. "Captain Liu," the Zinth leader acknowledged, his translated voice carrying notes of strain. "Your tactics are unexpected." Mara smiled directly into the transmission. "High Consul, I believe there's been a misunderstanding. You declared war, and we're simply responding with our cultural greeting." Cultural greeting, confusion, rippled through the consul's light patterns. "You are broadcasting nonsensical narratives and illogical scenarios." "We call it humor," Mara explained, as if to a child. "It's how humans process cognitive dissonance. You've created quite a bit of that today." Behind Murthok, several Zinth officers had stopped their coordinated movements, their attention caught by the streaming content. One appeared to be watching an ancient comedic performance by a human dressed as a bumbling inspector, repeatedly falling through an obvious trapdoor. "Your attempt at psychological warfare is noted," the High Consul stated, though his mandibles clicked in what Kellen had once described as the Zinth equivalent of cognitive strain. "It will not deter our objective." "Which is what, exactly?" Mara asked, leaning forward. "You've spent centuries living peacefully alongside humans. What changed?" "Your expansion rate exceeds acceptable parameters. Your cultural influence creates unpredictable outcomes. The collective cannot calculate stable futures with human variables." Mara nodded thoughtfully. "So you're afraid?" The accusation visibly startled the High Consul, his carapace flashing defensive patterns. "The collective does not experience fear. We calculate probabilities and act accordingly. Calculating probabilities because of fear of unknown outcomes is still fear," Mara pointed out. "But here's what your calculations missed. Humans thrive on uncertainty. We don't fear it. We laugh at it." As if on cue, the bridge behind Murthok erupted in an uncharacteristic disturbance. A Zinth officer had stopped completely, its body vibrating in an unusual pattern. The sound that emerged from its spiracles was completely alien to the collective standard, a series of rhythmic exhalations. The officer was laughing. Murthok turned in evident alarm, the coordinated control of the bridge faltering as the anomalous behavior spread to two more officers. "What have you done?" the High Consul demanded, turning back to the screen. "Introduced a new variable," Mara answered calmly. "High Consul, I'm about to approach your vessel. I request permission to come aboard, unarmed, to discuss terms." "Denied. Any approach will be considered hostile." "I'm coming anyway," Mara informed him. "You can either prepare to receive me, or prepare to explain to the conquered why you destroyed an unarmed diplomatic vessel during peace negotiations." Before he could respond, she signaled Row 9 to end transmission. "Set course directly for the Zinth flagship," she ordered. Full diplomatic approach protocols. Captain, Suri protested, they'll fire on us. No, they won't, Mara assured her. Their probability matrices are already failing. Direct confrontation with an unarmed vessel doesn't fit any scenario they've calculated. As the Serenity's Writ altered course, heading straight for the heart of the Zinth formation, Mara rose from her chair. Kellen, you have the bridge. Continue broadcasting the comedy compilation, but start weaving in examples of successful human-Zinth cooperation from the archives. Suri, I need you to prepare something special. 10 minutes later, Mara stood in the transport room, dressed in formal diplomatic attire. Around her neck hung the Earth Peace Medal, a simple silver disc engraved with the ancient symbol of a dove. And in her hand, she held what Suri had rushed to fabricate, a small, antiquated object bound in genuine synthesized leather. A joke book? Kellen questioned, scales flickering between concern and amusement. The oldest human comedy we could find, Mara confirmed. Jokes from ancient Earth civilizations, some dating back thousands of years. Captain, Row 9 interrupted, its hologram appearing beside her. The Zinth flagship is powering weapon systems. Mara nodded calmly. Maintain course. Continue broadcasting. They're ordering all vessels to target us specifically, the AI added. Good. That means we have their complete attention. She stepped onto the transport pad. Energize when ready. Suri's hands hovered over the controls. Captain, this is suicide. This is diplomacy, Suri. The real kind. Mara straightened her uniform. Besides, their weapons won't fire. How can you be so sure? Mara's smile held absolute conviction. Because right now, their tactical officers are watching footage of a human performer pretending to walk against high wind. Trust me, their collective consciousness is experiencing its first case of cognitive hiccups. Before Suri could protest further, Mara nodded. Energize! The transport beam engulfed her in golden light, breaking her molecular structure down for reassembly aboard the enemy flagship. As reality dissolved around her, Mara had one final thought. In 1,000 years of peace, humans had forgotten what made them uniquely suited for crisis. Not their technology, not their military prowess, but their capacity to laugh in the face of the absurd. The transport beam deposited Mara directly onto the bridge of the Zinth flagship. As her molecules reassembled, she took in the scene with trained diplomatic perception. The Zinth command center was in unprecedented disarray. The normally synchronized movements of bridge officers had broken down into individual patterns. Several had completely stopped their functions, carapaces flashing with erratic light sequences as they observed screens displaying the human comedy broadcasts. In one corner, 3 officers huddled around a particular display, their bodies vibrating with suppressed reactions. At the center of it all stood High Consul Merthok, his compound eyes fixed on Mara with an intensity that suggested both outrage and fascination. Captain Liu, he acknowledged, mandibles clicking rapidly. Your presence here violates 17 different protocols. Mara smiled pleasantly. Good afternoon, High Consul. I believe when one declares war, certain protocols become flexible. She glanced around the bridge. I see your crew is enjoying our cultural exchange. They are being subjected to psychological warfare, Merthok corrected, though his secondary antennae twitched in what Mara recognized as uncertainty. Your transmission has infected our communication systems. Infected is such a negative term, Mara countered, stepping forward with deliberate confidence. I prefer enriched, or perhaps enlightened. She gestured to a nearby officer who was clearly struggling to maintain composure. Your navigation specialist seems particularly enlightened. The officer in question was watching a centuries-old comedy sketch involving humans attempting to move an impossibly large object through a very small doorway. Each new approach and subsequent failure was being met with increasingly obvious physical responses, the Zinth equivalent of suppressed laughter. What do you hope to accomplish with this disruption? Merthak demanded, though his voice carried less certainty than before. Mara held his gaze. The same thing humans have always hoped to accomplish with humor. High Consul. Perspective. She moved to the central command platform, deliberately unhurried. No Zinth moved to stop her. Whether from confusion or curiosity was unclear. You declared war because your probability matrices showed human expansion, threatening conquered stability. She continued. But your calculations failed to account for a fundamental aspect of human psychology. Which is? We don't fear chaos. We embrace it. Mara spread her hands. Look around you. High Consul. Your perfectly ordered bridge is experiencing disorder. Your precisely calculated war plan is unraveling. And yet, has anything truly catastrophic occurred? A low vibration passed through the assembled Zinth. Not quite communication, not quite reaction, but something in between. Several officers had completely abandoned their posts, drawn inexorably to the screens displaying human comedy. This is temporary disruption, Merthak insisted, though his carapace patterns suggested decreasing conviction. The collective will reassert control. Perhaps, Mara acknowledged. But consider this. What if controlled disruption is exactly what the Concord needs? What if perfect stability leads not to growth, but to stagnation? She reached into her uniform pocket and withdrew the small leather-bound book Suri had prepared. This contains jokes from ancient Earth, some over 4,000 years old. Humans have been using humor to process uncertainty since before we mastered fire. She opened to a marked page and read, "A priest, a rabbi, and an imam walk into a bar. The bartender looks up and says, 'What is this? Some kind of joke?' For a moment, silence gripped the bridge. Then, from somewhere in the back, came a sound no human had ever documented from a Zinth before, a clear, unmistakable chuckle. Like a cascade failure in a perfectly aligned system. The response spread. One officer, then 3. Then a dozen began emitting the strange, rhythmic sound. Some fought it, their carapaces flashing with patterns of resistance. Others seemed to surrender to the novel sensation, their bodies vibrating with release. High Consul Merthak remained rigidly controlled, but even his compound eyes showed signs of strain, facets dilating and contracting in irregular patterns. "You see, High Consul," Mara continued, closing the book, "humor exists precisely because reality doesn't conform to expectations. It's how intelligent minds reconcile the gap between what should be and what is. Even your collective consciousness recognizes cognitive dissonance. You've just been suppressing your natural response to it. This reaction is temporary," Merthak insisted, though his translator conveyed decreasing conviction. "Of course it is," Mara agreed. "All emotions are temporary. That's what makes them valuable. They provide perspective, then fade, allowing for new understanding." She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a tone of genuine empathy. "You declared war because you fear what you cannot predict. But consider the alternative. What if unpredictability is not a threat, but an opportunity? What if human chaos actually stabilizes the conquered by preventing the stagnation that perfect order inevitably creates?" The bridge had grown quieter, the initial wave of unprecedented emotional response settling into something more contemplative. Even those officers who had succumbed to laughter were regaining composure, though their carapaces continued to pulse with unfamiliar patterns. "Your hypothesis is interesting," Merthak admitted, his translator conveying genuine uncertainty. "But unproven. 1,000 years of peace despite human expansion seems like compelling evidence," Mara countered. "We've been the unpredictable element in the Concord equation since we joined. Yet look at what we've accomplished together." She turned to address the entire bridge. "The collective prides itself on processing all available data before reaching consensus. But you've been systematically excluding a critical variable, the value of controlled chaos in stable systems. Merthak's antennae twitched in the Zinth equivalent of reluctant consideration. You propose that human unpredictability serves as a beneficial randomization factor? Exactly, Mara smiled. In Earth's ancient computer systems, programmers would deliberately introduce entropy to prevent algorithmic stagnation. They called it random seeding. Humans are the Concord's random seed, preventing perfect order from becoming perfect stagnation. A subtle vibration passed through the assembled Zinth, the physical manifestation of collective processing. Mara recognized the signs of a hive mind reaching toward new consensus. Your argument merits analysis, the High Consul finally stated. I propose a temporary cessation of hostilities, while the collective recalculates with this new variable. Mara shook her head. Not temporary, permanent. The Zinth Collective will withdraw its declaration of war and agree to join Earth in establishing a new Concord initiative, the Cultural Exchange Council. That exceeds reasonable. You declared war during a peace ceremony, Mara interrupted, her voice hardening for the first time. The reasonable response would be for Earth to demand sanctions against the Collective. Instead, we're offering partnership in understanding the very thing you fear. She gestured to the officers still watching the comedy broadcasts. Your own people are discovering something their collective consciousness has suppressed for millennia. The adaptive value of humor in processing cognitive dissonance. Another wave of vibration passed through the assembled Zinth. Stronger this time. Several officers turned toward Merthak, their carapaces flashing with patterns Mara couldn't interpret. The High Consul stood motionless for long moments, compound eyes shifting between Mara and his crew. When he finally spoke, his translator conveyed a tone never before documented in Zinth communication: humility. The collective acknowledges the possibility of calculation error, he stated. We withdraw our declaration of war, pending establishment of this Cultural Exchange Council. Relief washed through Mara, though she maintained her diplomatic composure. A wise decision, High Consul. Earth accepts your withdrawal and looks forward to deeper understanding between our peoples. She extended her hand, a human gesture of agreement the Zinth had always found peculiarly unnecessary. To her surprise, Merthak extended his upper appendage in return, the chitinous limb meeting her flesh in awkward but symbolic contact. There is one condition, he added, mandibles clicking with what might have been embarrassment. The collective requests copies of these comedy transmissions for further study. Mara's smile widened. I believe that can be arranged. Consider it the first official exchange of our new council. As if on cue, her communicator chimed. Captain, came Row 9's voice. Earth Defense Command reports all Zinth vessels are powering down weapon systems. Admiral Khatri requests confirmation of status. Inform the Admiral that diplomatic resolution has been achieved. Mara responded. The Zinth Collective has withdrawn their declaration of war and agreed to establish a joint cultural exchange council. And, Captain, the AI added, with what sounded suspiciously like amusement. Terran vessels are reporting that several Zinth ships appear to be broadcasting comedy back at them. Mara glanced at Merthak, whose carapace flashed with patterns that might almost be interpreted as embarrassment. It appears, the High Consul explained, that some members of the collective have developed an unexpected appreciation for what you call slapstick. For the first time in recorded history, a human and a Zinth shared something that transcended both species and their vast biological differences: genuine, spontaneous laughter. 3 weeks later, Mara stood at the observation window of The Last Laugh, a newly established comedy club orbiting Valyria Prime. Behind her, the converted diplomatic chamber hummed with activity as representatives from 23 species prepared for the inaugural session of the Cultural Exchange Council. I still can't believe we're holding peace talks in a comedy club, Suri commented, joining her at the window. The young engineer had spent the past weeks helping retrofit the space, installing specialized translation systems that preserve the nuances of humor across vastly different biological and cultural frameworks. "Where better?" Mara replied. "Laughter is the universal translator we never knew we needed." The doors slid open to admit Kellen, whose scales rippled with excited blue-green patterns. "The Morcillan delegation has arrived, and you won't believe what they've brought." "Let me guess," Mara smiled. "Their own jokes?" "An entire anthology of what they call logic inversions," Kellen confirmed. "Apparently they've had their own form of humor all along, but considered it too culturally specific to translate." Row 9's hologram materialized beside them. "The Jara and Ul delegations are requesting permission to present a collaborative comedy performance. They're calling it United in Absurdity." Mara shook her head in wonder. 3 weeks ago they were ready to side with the Zinth against us. Now they're doing stand-up together. "Humor is contagious," Kellen observed, scales shifting to philosophical purple. "Once you recognize the value of processing cognitive dissonance through laughter rather than fear, you can't unrecognize it." The doors opened again, admitting High Consul Merthak. The Zinth leader moved with a subtly different gait than before, still precise, but with a fluidity that suggested evolution in the collective consciousness. "Captain Liu," he greeted, mandibles clicking in what Mara now recognized as the Zinth approximation of warmth. "The collective wishes to present our preliminary findings on human humor categorization." "I look forward to it, High Consul." "We have identified 73 distinct subcategories," he continued, "though the categorization of what you call dad jokes remains problematic. Their deliberate subversion of humor expectations while still triggering humor responses creates a fascinating paradox." Suri suppressed a laugh. "You've been studying puns, haven't you?" "Indeed." The Zinth's carapace pulsed with what might have been pride. "I have prepared what humans would classify as a knock-knock joke for the opening ceremony." Mara exchanged glances with her crew. The High Consul, who had declared war less than a month ago, was now crafting jokes. If that wasn't evidence of successful diplomacy, nothing was. As delegates filed into the chamber, taking seats designed to accommodate their diverse physiologies, Mara felt a profound sense of accomplishment. The Conquered had faced its first serious threat in a millennium and emerged not merely intact, but fundamentally strengthened. "You know," Suri mused, watching the gathering, "when they declared war, I was terrified. But now, I'm actually grateful it happened. As am I." Merthak surprised them by agreeing. "The collective has recalculated our long-term projections with the new variable of controlled cognitive dissonance. The results are unexpected." "Good unexpected or bad unexpected?" Kellen inquired. "Simply unexpected," the Zinth replied, carapace flashing with new patterns. "And we find that state satisfactory." As they moved to take their positions for the ceremony, Admiral Khatri approached, resplendent in formal Terran defense uniform. "Captain Liu," she acknowledged, "Earth Defense Command has reviewed your mission report. Your methods were unconventional, but effective," Mara pointed out. The Admiral's stern expression cracked into a rare smile. "Extraordinarily so. The President has authorized me to offer you command of the new cultural exchange fleet. 6 vessels, mixed crews, with a mandate to deepen understanding across the Conquered." Before Mara could respond, a soft chime announced the ceremony's commencement. The converted chamber fell silent as the Supreme Arbiter took the central position. Crystalline form, refracting the light of Valeria's 3 suns. "Representatives of the Interstellar Conquered," the Arbiter began. "We gather to inaugurate a new chapter in our shared history. 3 weeks ago, war was declared. Today, we launch not battleships, but a fleet of understanding." The Arbiter gestured to where Mara and Merthak stood side by side. "Our first presenters represent both the challenge we faced and the solution we found. High Consul Merthak of the Zinth Collective and Captain Mara Lu of Earth will open our proceedings." As they stepped forward together, Merthak turned to Mara. "I have prepared my knock-knock joke, but find myself experiencing uncertainty about its reception." "That's normal," Mara assured him. "Every comedian feels that before performing." Even after centuries of diplomatic service, I had not anticipated ending my career as what humans call a stand-up comic. Mara smiled. "The best diplomacy, like the best comedy, surprises everyone, especially the diplomat." They reached the center of the chamber, facing the assembled representatives of nearly 50 species. Merthak's carapace pulsed with uncharacteristic nervousness as he began the Concord's first official cross-species comedy performance. "Knock, knock," the High Consul announced, mandibles clicking in anticipated humor. From across the chamber, voices of a dozen different species called back in surprising unison, "Who's there?" As laughter spread through the ancient hall of diplomacy, Mara made a final log entry in her personal recorder. "War was declared, we laughed, now we rebuild. May humor be our universal treaty." And throughout the Concord, on planets circling distant suns, in the hearts and minds and collective consciousnesses of countless beings, a new understanding dawned. That perhaps the greatest strength of civilization was not its ability to maintain perfect order, but its capacity to laugh together at the beautiful, chaotic absurdity of existence.